Through it, you must open your soul. You must open it fully to the supreme source of all inspiration. Are you an orator? In the degree that you come into harmony and work in conjunction with the higher powers that will speak through you will you have the real power of molding and moving men. If you use merely your physical agents, you will be simply a demagogue. If you open yourself so that the voice of God can speak through and use your physical agents, you will become a great and true orator. Great and true in just the degree that you so open yourself. Are you a singer? Then open yourself and let the God within pour forth in the spirit of song. You will find it 1,000 times easier than all your long and studied practice without this. And other things being equal, there will come to you a power of song so enchanting and so enrapturing that its influence upon all who hear will be irresistible. When my cabin or tent has been pitched during the summer on the edge or in the midst of a forest, I have sometimes lain awake on my cot in the early morning, just as the day was beginning to break. Silence at first, then an intermittent chirp here and there, and as the unfolding tints of dawn became faintly perceptible, these grew more and more frequent, until by and by the whole forest seemed to burst forth in one grand chorus of song. Wonderful! Wonderful! It seemed as if the very trees, as if every grass blade, as if the bushes, the very sky above, and the earth beneath had part in this wonderful symphony. Then, as I have listened as it went on, I have thought, what a study in the matter of song! If we could but learn from the birds, if we could but open ourselves to the same powers and allow them to pour forth in us, what singers, what movers of men we might have! Nay, what singers and what movers of men we would have! Do you know the circumstances under which Mr. Sankey sang for the first time the 90 and 9? Says one of our able journals, "At a great meeting recently in Denver, Mr. Ira W. Sankey, before singing the 90 and 9, which perhaps of all his compositions is the one that has brought him the most fame, gave an account of its birth. Leaving Glasgow for Edinburgh with Mr. Moody, he stopped at a newsstand and bought a penny religious paper. Glancing over it as they rode on the cars, his eye fell on a few little verses in the corner of the page. Turning to Mr. Moody, he said, 'I've found my hymn.' But Mr. Moody was busily engaged and did not hear a word. Mr. Sankey did not find the time to take a tune for the verses, so he pasted them in his music scrapbook. One day they had an unusually impressive meeting in Edinburgh, in which Dr. Bonar had spoken with great effect on the Good Shepherd. At the close of the address, Mr. Moody beckoned to his partner to sing. He thought of nothing but the 23rd Psalm, but that he had sung it so often. His second thought was to sing the verses he had found in the newspaper, but the third thought was, how could it be done when he had no tune? Then a fourth thought came, and that was to sing them anyway. He put the verses before him, touched the keys of the organ, opened his mouth and sang, not knowing where he was going to come out. He finished the first verse amid profound silence. He took a long breath and wondered if he could sing the second the same way. He tried and succeeded. After that, it was easy to sing it. When he finished the hymn, the meeting was all broken down, and the throngs were crying. Mr. Sankey says it was the most intense moment of his life. Mr. Moody said he never heard a song like it. It was sung at every meeting, and was soon going all over the world." When we open ourselves to the highest inspirations, they never fail us. When we fail to do this, we fail in attaining the highest results, whatever the undertaking. Are you a writer? Then remember that the one great precept underlying all successful literary work is, look into thine own heart and write. Be true, be fearless, be loyal to the promptings of your own soul. Remember that an author can never write more than he himself is. If he would write more, then he must be more. He is simply his own amanuensis. He in a sense writes himself into his book. He can put no more into it than he himself is. If he is one of great personality, strong in purpose, deep in feeling, open always to the highest inspirations, a certain indefinable something gets into his pages that makes them breathe forth vital, living power. a power so great that each reader gets the same inspirations as those that spoke through the author. That's written between the lines is many more times more than that's written in the lines. It is the spirit of the author that engenders this power. It is this that gives that extra 25 or 30% that takes a book out of the class called medium and lifts it into the class called superior. That extra percent that makes it the one of the 100 that is truly successful, while the 99 never see more than their first edition. It is this same spiritual power that the author of a great personality puts into his work, that causes it to go so rapidly from reader to reader, for the only way that any book circulates in the ultimate is from mouth to mouth, any book that reaches a large circulation. It is this that many times causes a single reader, in view of its value to himself, to purchase numbers of copies for others. A good poem, says Emerson, goes about the world offering itself to reasonable men, who read it with joy and carry it to their reasonable neighbors. Thus it draws to it the wise and generous souls, confirming their secret thoughts, and through their sympathy really publishing itself. This is the type of author who writes not with the thought of having what he writes become literature, but he writes with the sole thought of reaching the hearts of the people, giving them something of vital value, something that will broaden, sweeten, enrich, and beautify their lives, that will lead them to the finding of the higher life, and with it the higher powers and the higher joys. It most always happens, however, that if he succeeds in thus reaching the people, the becoming literature part somehow takes care of itself, and far better than if he aimed for it directly. The one, on the other hand, who fears to depart from beaten paths, who allows himself to be bound by arbitrary rules, limits his own creative powers in just the degree that he allows himself so to be bound. "My book," says one of the greatest of modern authors, "shall smell of the pines and resound with the hum of insects. The swallow over my window shall interweave that thread or straw he carries in his bill into my web also." Far better, gentle sage, to have it smell of the pines and resound with the hum of insects, than to have it sound of the rules that a smaller type of man gets by studying the works of a few great, fearless writers like yourself, and formulating from what he thus gains a handbook of rhetoric. Of no use are the men who study to do exactly as was done before, who can never understand that today is a new day. When Shakespeare is charged with debts to his authors, Landor replies, "Yet he was more original than his originals. He breathed upon dead bodies and brought them into life." This is the type of man who doesn't move the world's way, but who moves the world his way. I'd rather be an amanuensis of the infinite God, as it is my privilege literally to be, than a slave to the formulated rules of any rhetorician, or to the opinions of any critic. Oh, the people over and over. Let me give something to them that will lighten the everyday struggles of our common life, something that will add a little sweetness here, a little hope there, something that will make more thoughtful, kind, and gentle this thoughtless, animal-natured man, something that will awaken into activity the dormant powers of this timid, shrinking little woman, powers that when awakened will be irresistible in their influence, and that will surprise even herself. Let me give something that will lead each one to the knowledge of the divinity of every human soul, something that will lead each one to the conscious realization of his own divinity, with all its attendant riches and glories and powers. Let me succeed in doing this, and I can then well afford to be careless as to whether the critics praise or whether they blame. If it is blame, then under these circumstances it is as the cracking of a few dead sticks on the ground below, compared to the matchless music that the soft spring gale is breathing through the great pine forest. Are you a minister or a religious teacher of any kind? Then in the degree that you free yourself from the man-made theological dogmas that have held and that are holding and limiting so many, and in the degree that you open yourself to the divine breath, will you be one who will speak with authority. In the degree that you do this will you study the prophets less and be in the way of becoming a prophet yourself. The way is open for you, exactly the same as it has ever been open for anyone. If when born into the world you came into a family of the English-speaking race, then in all probability you are a Christian. To be a Christian is to be a follower of the teachings of Jesus, the Christ, to live in harmony with the same laws he lived in harmony with. In brief, to live his life. The great central fact of his teaching was this conscious union of man with the Father. It was the complete realization of this oneness with the Father on his part that made Jesus the Christ. It was through this that he attained the power he attained to, that he spake never as man spake. He never claimed for himself anything he did not claim equally for all mankind. The mighty works performed by Jesus were not exceptional. They were the natural and necessary concomitants of his state. He declared them to be in accordance with unvarying order. He spoke of them as no unique performances, but as the outcome of a state to which all might attain, if they choose. As a teacher and demonstrator of truth, according to his own confession, he did nothing for the purpose of proving his solitary divinity. The life and triumph of Jesus formed an epoch in the history of the race. His coming and victory marked a new era in human affairs. He introduced a new because a more complete ideal to the earth. And when his three most intimate companions saw in some measure what the new life really signified, they fell to the earth, speechless with awe and admiration. By coming into this complete realization of his oneness with the Father, by mastering, absolutely mastering every circumstance that crossed his path through life, even to the death of the body, and by pointing out to us the great laws which are the same for us as they were for him, he has given us an ideal of life, an ideal for us to attain to here and now, that we could not have without him. One has conquered first, all may conquer afterward. By completely realizing it first for himself, and then by pointing out to others this great law of the at-one-ment with the Father, he has become probably the world's greatest savior. Don't mistake his mere person for his life and teachings, an error that has been made in connection with most all great teachers by their disciples over and over again. And if you have been among the number who have been preaching a dead Christ, then for humanity's sake, for Christ's sake, for God's sake, and I speak most reverently, don't steal the people's time any longer. Don't waste your own time more in giving them stones in place of bread, dead form for the spirit of living truth. In his own words, let the dead bury their dead. Come out among them. Teach as did Jesus, the Christ within. Find this in all its transcendent beauty and power. Find it as Jesus found it. Then you will also be one who will speak with authority. Then you will be able to lead large numbers of others to its finding. This is the pearl of great price. It is the type of preacher whose soul has never as yet even perceived the vital spirit of the teachings of Jesus, and who, as a consequence, instead of giving this to the people, is giving them old forms and dogmas and speculations, who is emptying our churches. This is the type whose chief efforts seem to be in getting men ready to die. Germans have a saying, "Never go to the second thing first." We need men who will teach us first how to live. Living quite invariably precedes dying. This also is true, that when we once know how to live, and live in accordance with what we know, then the dying, as we term it, will in a wonderfully beautiful manner take care of itself. It is in this fact the only way in which it can be taken care of. It is on account of this emptying of our churches, for the reason that the people are tiring of mere husks, that many short-sighted people are frequently heard to say that religion is dying out. Religion dying out? How can anything die before it is really born? And so far as the people are concerned, religion is just being born, or rather, they are just awaking to a vital, everyday religion. We are just beginning to get beyond the mere letter into its real, vital spirit. Religion dying out? Impossible even to conceive of. Religion is as much a part of the human soul as the human soul is a part of God, and as long as God and the human soul exist, religion will never die. Much of the dogma, the form, the ceremony, the mere letter that has stood as religion, and honestly, many times, let us be fair enough to say, this, thank God, is rapidly dying out, and never so rapidly as it is today. By two methods it is dying. There is first, a large class of people tired or even nauseated with it all, who consciously prefer to have nothing rather than this. They are simply abandoning it, the same as a tree abandons its leaves when the early winter comes. There is second, a large class in whom the divine breath is stirring, who are finding the Christ within in all its matchless beauty and redeeming power, and this new life is pushing off the old, the same as in the spring the newly awakened life in the tree pushes off the old, lifeless leaves that have clung on during the winter, to make place for the new ones. And the way this old dead leaf religion is being pushed off on every hand is indeed most interesting and inspiring to witness. Let the places of those who have been emptying our churches by reason of their attempts to give stones for bread, husks and chaff for the life-giving grain, let their places be taken even for but a few times by those who are open and alive to these higher inspirations. And then let us again question those who feel that religion is dying out. It is the live coal that kindles others, not the dead. Let their places be taken by those who have caught the inspiration of the divine breath, who as a consequence have a message of mighty value and import for the people, who by virtue of this same fact are able to present it with a beauty and a power so enrapturing that it takes captive the soul. Then we will find that the churches that today are dotted here and there with a few dozen people will be filled to overflowing, and there will not be even room enough for all who would enter. Let the shell perish what the pearl may appear. We need no new revelations as yet. We need simply to find the vital spirit of those we already have. Then in due time, when we are ready for them, new ones will come, but not before. What the human soul all over the world needs, says John Pulsford, is not to be harangued however eloquently about old accepted religion, but to be permeated, charmed, and taken captive by a warmer and more potent breath of God than they ever felt before. And I should not be true to my personal experience if I did not bear testimony that this divine breath is as exquisitely adapted to the requirements of the soul's nature as a June morning to the planet. Nor does the morning breath leave the trees freer to delight themselves and develop themselves under its influence than the breath of God allows each human mind to unfold according to its genius. Nothing stirs the central wheel of the soul like the breath of God. The whole man is quickened. His senses are new senses, his emotions new emotions, his reasons, his affections, his imagination are all newborn. The change is greater than he knows. He marvels at the power in himself which the breath is opening and calling forth. He finds his nature to be an unutterable thing. He is sure, therefore, that the future must have inconceivable surprises in store. And herein lies the evidence, which I commend to my readers, of the existence of God, and of the eternal human hope. Let God's breath kindle a new springtime in the soul, start into life its deeply buried gems, lead in heaven's summer. You will then have as clear evidence of God from within as you have of the universe from without. Indeed, your internal experience of life and illimitable hope in God will be nearer to you, and more prevailing than all your external and superficial experience of nature and the world. There is but one source of power in the universe. Whatever then you are, painter, orator, musician, writer, religious teacher, or whatever it may be, know that to catch and take captive the secret of power is so to work in conjunction with the infinite power, in order that it may continually work and manifest through you. If you fail in doing this, you fail in everything. If you fail in doing this, your work, whatever it may be, will be third or fourth rate, possibly at times second rate, but it positively never can be first rate. Absolutely impossible will it be for you to ever become a master. Whatever estimate you put upon yourself will determine the effectiveness of your work along any line. As long as you live merely in the physical and the intellectual, you set limitations to yourself that will hold you as long as you so live. When, however, you come into the realization of your oneness with the infinite life and power, and you open yourself that it may work through you, you will find that you have entered upon an entirely new phase of life, and that ever-growing increasing power will be yours. Then it will be true that your strength will be as the strength of 10 because your heart is pure. O God, I am one forever with Thee by the glory of birth. The celestial powers proclaim it to the utmost bounds of the earth. I think of this birthright immortal, and my being expands like a rose. As an odorous cloud of incense, around and above me it flows. A glorious song of rejoicing, an innermost spirit I hear, and it sounds like heavenly voices in a chorus divine and clear. And I feel a power uprising, like the power of an embryo God. With a glorious wall it surrounds me, and lifts me up from the sod. End of section 8. Section 9 of In Tune with the Infinite by Ralph Waldo Trine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Plenty of all things, the law of prosperity. This is the spirit of infinite plenty, the power that has brought, that is continually bringing, all things into expression in material form. He who lives in the realization of his oneness with this infinite power becomes a magnet to attract to himself a continual supply whatsoever things he desires. If one holds himself in the thought of poverty, he will be poor, and the chances are that he will remain in poverty. If he hold himself, whatever present conditions may be, continually in the thought of prosperity, he sets into operation forces that will sooner or later bring him into prosperous conditions. The law of attraction works unceasingly throughout the universe, and the one great and never-changing fact in connection with it is, as we have found, that like attracts like. If we are one with this infinite power, this source of all things, then in the degree that we live in the realization of this oneness, in that degree do we actualize in ourselves a power that will bring to us an abundance of all things that is desirable for us to have. In this way we come into possession of a power whereby we can actualize at all times those conditions that we desire. As all truth exists now, and awaits simply our perception of it, so all things necessary for present needs exist now, and await simply the power in us to appropriate them. God holds all things in His hands. His constant word is, "My child, acknowledge me in all your ways, and in the degree that you do this, in the degree that you live this, then what is mine is yours." Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. He giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not. He giveth liberally to all men who put themselves in the right attitude to receive from Him. He forces no good things upon anyone. The old and somewhat prevalent idea of godliness and poverty has absolutely no basis for its existence, and the sooner we get away from it the better. It had its birth in the same way that the idea of asceticism came into existence, when the idea prevailed that there was necessarily a warfare between the flesh and the spirit. It had its origin, therefore, in the minds of those who had a distorted, a one-sided view of life. True godliness is in a sense the same as true wisdom. The one who is truly wise, and who uses the forces and powers with which he is endowed, to him the great universe always opens her treasure house. The supply is always equal to the demand. Equal to the demand when the demand is rightly, wisely made. When one comes into realization of these higher laws, then the fear of want ceases to tyrannize over him. Are you out of a situation? Let the fear that you will not get another take hold of and dominate you, and the chances are that it may be a long time before you will get another, or the one that you do get may be a very poor one indeed. Whatever the circumstances, you must realize that you have within you forces and powers that you can set into operation that will triumph over any and all apparent or temporary losses. Set these forces into operation, and you will then be placing a magnet that will draw to you a situation that may be far better than the one you have lost, and the time may soon come when you will be even thankful that you lost the old one. Recognize, working in and through you, the same infinite power that creates and governs all things in the universe, the same infinite power that governs the endless systems of worlds in space. Send out your thought. Thought is a force, and it has occult power of unknown proportions when rightly used and wisely directed. Send out your thought that the right situation or the right work will come to you at the right time, in the right way, and that you will recognize it when it comes. Hold to this thought. Never allow it to weaken. Hold to it, and continually water it with firm expectation. You in this way put your advertisement into a spiritual newspaper, a paper that has not a limited circulation, but one that will make its way not only to the utmost bounds of the earth, but of the very universe itself. It is an advertisement, moreover, which, if rightly placed on your part, will be far more effective than any advertisement you could possibly put into any printed sheet, no matter what claims are made in regard to its being the great advertising medium. In the degree that you come into this realization and live in harmony with the higher laws and forces, in that degree you will be able to do this effectively. If you wish to look through the want columns of the newspapers, then do it not in the ordinary way. Put the higher forces into operation, and thus place it on a higher basis. As you take up the paper, take this attitude of mind. If there is here an advertisement that it will be well for me to reply to, the moment I come to it I will recognize it. Affirm this, believe it, expect it. If you do this in full faith, you will somehow feel the intuition the moment you come to the right one, and this intuition will be nothing more nor less than your own soul speaking to you. When it speaks, then act at once. If you get the situation and it does not prove to be exactly what you want, if you feel that you are capable of filling a better one, then the moment you enter upon it, take the attitude of mind that this situation is the stepping stone that will lead you to one that will be still better. Hold this thought steadily, affirm it, believe it, expect it, and all the time be faithful, absolutely faithful to the situation in which you are at present placed. If you are not faithful to it, then the chances are that it will not be the stepping stone to something better, but to something poorer. If you are faithful to it, the time may soon come when you will be glad and thankful, when you will rejoice that you lost your old position. This is the law of prosperity. When apparent adversity comes, be not cast down by it, but make the best of it, and always look forward for better things, for conditions more prosperous. To hold yourself in this attitude of mind is to set into operation subtle, silent, and irresistible forces that sooner or later will actualize in material form that which is today merely an idea. But ideas have occult power, and ideas, when rightly planted and rightly tended, are the seeds that actualize material conditions. Never give a moment to complaint, but utilize the time that would otherwise be spent in this way in looking forward and actualizing the conditions you desire. Suggest prosperity to yourself. See yourself in a prosperous condition. Affirm that you will before long be in a prosperous condition. Affirm it calmly and quietly, but strongly and confidently. Believe it absolutely. Expect it. Keep it continually watered with expectation. You thus make yourself a magnet to attract the things that you desire. Don't be afraid to suggest, to affirm these things, for by so doing you put forth an ideal which will begin to clothe itself in material form. In this way you are utilizing agents among the most subtle and powerful in the universe. If you are particularly desirous for any